Hi everyone, my name is Rafaela. I teach third grade and this is my mind map. I included 5 lesson ideas that I brainstormed for teaching a small group lessons on informative writing. This small group would consist of 3 students, all of whom I feel could benefit from being taught similar skills. Based on their on-demand writing, they were all lacking organization, elaboration, and could use assistance bringing more attention to their spelling. My students are also extremely interested in science and animals, so I chose more mentor texts that I thought would be very engaging to them. For the first lesson, I would start by bringing attention to how authors of informational books write about something they are experts on. This connects to the standard W.3.2, writing informative or explanatory text to examine a topic. I would use the text Blizzards, which is a science based scholastic leveled reader, to have students go through sort of a picture walk. And as we'd look through the book together, I would pose the question, what do you think this author knows a lot about? And I would guide students to recognize that the author is teaching us all about blizzards, knowing a lot about them to have chosen to write a whole book about them. This would lead us into brainstorming our own list of things we are experts at. I would have the children watch me as I brainstormed my own list, then pick one to focus on. And I would model how my topic, something like how to be a great babysitter, and what subtopics I would discuss along with it, such as keeping the child safe and entertaining kids. And this would help show my students how to focus their thoughts and kind of narrow them down into what topics are important to discuss, just like chapters in a book, and how to narrow down what else is discussed along with their main topic. The students would be given time to practice these strategies independently and begin drafting. I would confer with each student one-on-one and give them time to share what they drafted at the end of the day. For lesson 2, I would focus heavily on introductions. None of the students in this small group included introductions in their on-demand piece, and they often forget introduction paragraphs in general when writing any kind of writing piece. So this connects to the standard W.3.2.A. The National Geographic Kids book entitled Dolphins has a great introduction chapter that I would think that would hook the students into the lesson really well. It asks the reader questions as a way to introduce dolphins. So it says things like, what loves to jump but isn't a frog? What swims in the water but isn't a fish? And I would model how to do the exact same strategy with my own informational writing about like babysitting. Something like, who loves to play fun games with kids on the weekends while their parents are out for the night? Something like that. And then I would have my kids practice creating an introduction together, maybe giving them the idea of like, how to be an awesome third grader. How could you introduce that? And I feel like it would be a fun way to create kind of a simple introduction since these students are some of my lower writers and readers. I know a few sentences is what they're capable of for writing an introduction. So for independent work, they would create their own introductions and continue drafting their pieces from the previous lesson. And I would coach into using special vocabulary words and helping them sound like an expert in those conferences with them. I would also remind students that they can sketch while drawing, and that's always acceptable to help them stay focused and get more ideas flowing because these students often run out of steam when they are writing. Lesson 3 would focus on details and elaborating students' drafts. This connects to the standards W.3.2.B, developing facts, definitions, and details, and W.3.2.C, which is using linking words and phrases. I would use the National Geographic Kids book Elephants to show students what partner sentences are, and I would explain to them how important it is to add more detail by giving a lonely sentence a partner. There are many great examples of this in the Elephants book, and I know my students are really interested in animals, so I would also have the Dolphins book from the previous lesson available for them to look at. And then I would model adding a partner sentence to my own section of my informative writing piece, and I would have the students switch notebooks and find 2 spots where a partner could add a partner sentence. Then they would focus on elaboration during this independent work. I would also give students a checklist of what is expected to be included in this informational writing piece. At some point, it might be in this lesson, or maybe I could just give it to them earlier so that they could have it to check off throughout the week, and I would coach into using those transition words during those conferences. Lesson 4 would focus on conclusions and polishing up their drafts. This connects to the standards W.3.2.D. And much like introductions, my students tend to completely forget to conclude any kind of writing pieces in the past. I just noticed they just forget to kind of wrap it up. So this is something that with their opinion pieces and their narrative pieces and then this on-demand writing piece, they really need to work on. So I would print and show them examples of conclusions just like in the Elephants and Dolphins books so they could see different ways that information gets wrapped up. And then I would model writing my own conclusion for my informative piece on being a good babysitter. And I think having sentence starters on a chart for them to use would be really helpful. Like, I am passionate about blank because, and they can use those while they're independently working to kind of help them craft that conclusion. I would coach into spelling during my conferences because it's something my students are really struggling with being attentive to. They're kind of careless with their spelling, and that's definitely been a struggle for them. I would have them use their quick word booklets, something we use in school, to help them. They would also have the word wall in their view, as well as dictionaries if they need them. And then to close the lesson, I would have them each ask each other a question about their topic to help them expand their writing even more. So, kind of questioning each other would be a part of the share. The last lesson would have a heavy focus on revision and proofreading. This is something my students struggle with a lot. They don't often like to reread their own writing, and they kind of miss a lot of those errors that they should be paying more attention to. And I would, of course, model with them how I would check my own draft using a rubric, the same one that I'm going to use to grade their pieces. And they could work on this independently too. And then they could finish publishing their pieces, whether they want to type them or write them, using peer feedback from the previous lesson to enhance their writing. Lastly, I would find time for the students to orally present their pieces in front of each other, and this connects to the standard SL.3.4, which is reporting or recounting an experience, speaking clearly at an understandable pace. So these 5 lessons are all centered around taking my students through the writing process in somewhat of a quicker pace than they might be used to. And I think this would benefit them because they all lacked an introduction and a conclusion for their on-demand pieces. They also struggled with organization. So in doing a few lessons just focusing on those major skills would allow them to have more of my attention away from a whole group lesson and really hone in on what they need.